Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, let's talk about the Pope's recent tour across Asia. Is it the Every Religion is Equal tour? I don't know, but we are going to have a conversation about it today with Michael Haynes, senior Vatican correspondent at LifeSiteNews. He wrote a whole series of articles related to the trip, not just to the sort of infamous now conversation that he had in Singapore, but also what about that ecumenical dialogue with the Muslims? All of that on climate change. So there's a lot to talk about. Michael Haynes is going to give us the recap of the entire trip and point out some of the more, juicier tidbits. All of that coming up at 14 past the hour. Also on the program at 30 past the hour, one of our insiders is going to be on the team. Back in 2022, he put out an article over at 1peter5.com. The saga of the Catholic fighting man continues. We're going to link to this article in the show notes today. But do you remember 2022 and the great pandemic? Well, think about what it was like for healthcare workers. I remember getting chastised because I didn't want to wear a mask in some sort of it was like a pawn shop or something like that. Could you imagine then being a healthcare worker who didn't want to get the shot and all of the rest? Well, they didn't just lose their jobs. It was much more than that. And Mark Ingoglio is going to be on the team to recount that for us and let us know where he's at today. So we're going to be catching up on that as well on the show. And if I've got time, I might even get into something that we know about and some of the questions that are still outstanding about the second assassination of Trump attempt yesterday, or it was on Sunday, I guess. Well, the shooter, or the potential shooter, the alleged shooter, he's been arraigned on federal gun charges. Very interesting. Lots of questions still. Maybe in the after show we can get into some of that. All of that and more today on the program. And I got to tell you, my daughter has just launched a young adult Catholic Writers Guild. Do you know any young Catholics who are into writing, literature, anything like that? I'm going to put a link in the show notes today for this group. You can join the group. It's a great way to support each other and to help each other grow as Catholic writers. So let's support that. A link in the description over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT in today's show notes. Let's pray. Let's begin. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
Saint Hildegard of Bingen, pray for us. Hildegard was born at the end of the 11th century to a minor German noble family in the Rhineland, a region along the famed Rhine River. She suffered from poor health and received little education, but began to experience mystical visions at a very early age. When she was still a child, her parents, perceiving their daughter's vocation, sent her to a Benedictine abbey. After several years, though she resisted at first, Hildegard was chosen to succeed her late mentor as abbess. Hildegard's pious leadership led to many fervent vocations, and soon she was commanded to record what she received in her visions. These writings made their way to Pope Blessed Eugene III, who added his approval to that of many other bishops and saints. Hildegard continued to write works of prophecy, theology, music, natural science, and other subjects, until her death in the year of our Lord 1179. Though the Sibyl of the Rhine was never formally canonized, veneration thrived, and her name was placed in the Martyrology. Pope Benedict XVI named her a Doctor of the Church. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Saint Hildegard, pray for us.
And now your headline news. The Hill reports NORAD again tracks Russian military aircraft near Alaskan coast. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, detected and tracked several Russian aircraft in the Alaska area over the last weekend. 2 aircraft were detected on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. The planes were Russian IL-38 military aircraft and were operating in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. NORAD said the aircraft remained in international airspace and did not enter American or Canadian airspace. And while the activity may be an uptick from normal operations, NORAD said this activity happens regularly and is not seen as a threat. Although fighter jets intercepted Chinese and Russian bombers off the coast of Alaska back in July, you might remember. Hey, CNA is reporting Vatican announces press conference on spiritual experience of Medjugorje. Cardinal Victor Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, will lead a press conference on the spiritual experience of Medjugorje this Thursday. Fernandez will be joined by Monsignor Armando Mateo, who serves as the secretary to the Dicastery's doctrinal section, along with Andrea Torinelli, editorial director of the Dicastery for Communications. Although no additional details about the event have been released, the press conference is being held within the framework of the new norms for proceeding in the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomenon published in May. Since then, the Holy See has been issuing rulings on various alleged Marian apparitions and devotions. And Daily Wire is reporting rap icon Sean Diddy Combs taken into federal custody after grand jury indictment. It was not immediately clear what the charges were that the grand jury indicted him on, but it comes amid a federal investigation that culminated in raids on Combs' properties earlier this year that focused on allegations of sex trafficking, sexual assault, and the solicitation and distribution of illegal narcotics and firearms, according to an NBC News report. The news comes after Combs faced numerous lawsuits and allegations of sexual misconduct after a video emerged in May of Combs beating his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura in a hotel back in 2016. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. Jesus journeyed to a city called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd accompanied him. As he drew near to the gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he was moved with pity for her and said to her, "Do not weep." He stepped forward and touched the coffin. At this, the bearers halted, and he said, "Young man, I tell you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, exclaiming, "A great prophet has arisen in our midst, and God has visited his people." This report about him spread through the whole of Judea and in all the surrounding region. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I like the parallels in this passage quite a bit, actually. The Ignatius Catholic Study Bible would say, the bereaved mother faces great hardship. With the death of her only son, she is left without family or economic security. Her livelihood would depend upon the charity of others in Israel. Mystically speaking, according to St. Ambrose, the widow signifies Mother Church, weeping for those who are dead in sin and carried beyond the safety of her gates. The multitudes looking on will praise the Lord when sinners rise again from death and are restored to their mother. But I want you to see the parallels here. Look at this story and think about the Lord himself. Both the son of this widow and the Lord are only begotten children. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, right? John chapter 3, verse 16, etc. Both of these two sons die. Both of these two sons come back to life. And both of these two sons are sons of a mother who is a widow. I want you to think about that. We should also be having in our mind the foot of the cross, when our Lord, dying on the cross, gives to his mother a new son. That son is the beloved disciple. Think about that. And that very hour, the beloved disciple takes Mary, our Blessed Virgin Mary, our mother, into his home and cares for her. He becomes the charity of the new Israel that is spoken of in the gospel commentary today. Father Ingoglio said, our Lord was moved with compassion at the sad condition of this desolate widow, and to leave us an example of how we are to treat the afflicted. He consoles her, not only by words, weep not, which might afford a cheap and barren sympathy, but by act. He goes on, the recitation of the young man of name has also an allegorical and moral teaching. The bereaved widow represents the church, who bewails over each of her sons by mortal sin dead to God, as if he were an only child. She weeps over them and employs the multitude of her children to intercede for them. Jesus, touched with compassion for the wailing of this bereaved spouse, at once speaks to their hearts. He employs the power and unction of his heavenly grace. He raises them mercifully to life and restores them to their now rejoicing mother to care for them and save them from wandering any more in the ways of sin and death. Close quote, Father Ingoglio. It is the will of God. It is the will of God that his mother should intercede for you. It is by design, by God's design. It is his intention and his will that you accept his mother into your home today. Do that. We'll be right back. Let's talk about the popes. All religions are equal to her across Asia next. Don't go anywhere. Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's great to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation with one of our ACT insiders, actually, Mark Ingoglio. He goes by Improximus. Back in the pandemic, 2020, all the way to 2023 and beyond, it seems, there was a lot of people affected. And many lost their jobs because they stood up for what they believed in a world that seemed to be diabolically confused. We're going to catch up with him on that story at 30 past. Do join us if you can. But there are lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to us. And recently, His Holiness Pope Francis made a trip across Asia, and there were several stops that were of great interest, I would say, not the least of which was his "Every religion is a way to arrive at God" statement in Singapore. There was also the great ecumenical climate change dialogue with the Muslims that stood out. Well, senior Vatican correspondent at livesitenews.com, Michael Haynes is joining us today to cover this. Good morning to you, Michael. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Lovely to be with you again.
Praise be to God. We don't live in boring times. We can at least say that much, which is good. So can you give us a recap? What was the itinerary of this trip? Where did he go? And what were the highlights?
Absolutely. So, as you say, from the very controversial aspects which have stuck out, but some other aspects which I think should be noted. This was the longest trip of Pope Francis's pontificate. He left Rome September the 2nd, got back September 13th. Took many different flights, travelled over 20,000 miles in that time. And he visited 4 countries. So he went to Indonesia, then to Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and Singapore. And you've got also very, very different cultural context in those places. You've got a heavily Muslim population in Indonesia, heavily Catholic population in East Timor. Then you've got, the Pope being surrounded by a great deal of poverty in the islands in Southeast Asia, and contrasted with the riches, the technological advances that he's surrounded with by in Singapore. So there are really many, many different aspects here. He's got his kind of standard, if you like, standard series of meetings in the countries. He meets with political leaders, with religious leaders, including bishops, priests, seminarians, and religious sisters from the countries. He also has his customary closed-door meetings with Jesuits from various countries that he makes in all of his visits as he goes around the world. And then, of course, he had his meetings with groups of Catholics, lay Catholics, particularly young Catholics as well.
One of the things that surprised me, and it's hard to jump in, but his health. We've been talking about his health and it being not good. He's not a spring chicken anymore, and his health isn't great. And this was, as you said, the longest trip of his pontificate. That seemed to be incredibly taxing, but how did he fare on the whole?
Absolutely. I mean, so the Pope is going to be 88 in December. Last spring, in the spring of 2023, we had the Pope being rushed to hospital with heart concerns. The speculation was really growing that within sort of a short time there would be a new conclave, perhaps we'd have a new Pope. And yet here we are sort of a year and a half later, and he's undertaking this huge trip, very taxing physically. Also, the climate that he's going into, not one that he's unused to per se, coming from South America, but a very taxing climate, high temperatures, very, very high humidity. Added to that, the time difference between there and Rome. This is a very, very taxing trip, and also a long trip, a very busy trip, but a lot compressed into 11 days, essentially. But the Pope seems to be sort of surprising his critics. It's almost like he was putting on a show of strength in making this trip towards the latter end, if you like, of his pontificate.
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you about the Indonesian stops, because Indonesia is a country that's predominantly Muslim, which is fascinating because I used to have colleagues in Indonesia, and they took off every Christian holiday, all of them. They had them all off. Easter, Good Friday, they enjoyed every Christian holiday, plus their own. It was fascinating. And yet, so there's a minority Christian population there, and yet he tries to tell the clergy there to not proselytize. I would have to believe that'd be kind of hard or confusing. Like, where's the line between evangelization in a country that needs to be evangelized and proselytization? I guess it depends on perspective and who we're talking to, right?
This is one of the fascinating things about his statements. So, as you say, he mentioned to the group of Indonesian clergy not to proselytize. And then you'll see Pope Francis in Catholic predominant countries extolling the virtues of the gospel, encouraging people to spread the joy of the gospel. We also saw in Indonesia, which is, I think, 87% Muslim, has still quite restrictive abortion laws. We saw him make quite a strong condemnation of anti-life laws when he was discussing with the Indonesian politicians. But at the same time, in countries where abortion is very permissive, and when he's meeting with people who are personally very pro-abortion, he's very silent on this aspect. So his statements are very much tailored to each particular situation. It seems almost as if he's seeking to avoid creating any offence, to have a very pleasant, enjoyable trip with the groups that he's with in each particular setting.
There's a lot of talk and obviously controversy surrounding some of the statements that he's made. And I want to get into the all religions arrive at God in a second in Singapore. But he gives a blessing and he skips giving the sign of the cross. This is in one of your articles over at LifeSiteNews.com. Again, we're linking to them today in the show notes. Pope Francis skips sign of the cross to impart blessing for all religions. Now, okay, St. Paul, Athens, we all know the story from the book of Acts. I get it. You meet people where they're at. But when you're the Holy Father, who's going to give you grief because you prayed and gave the sign of the cross? There's a difference between St. Paul, just some guy that's in the market debating people, and we want to talk to him, get to know him better, and the vicar of Christ on earth that everyone knows. I see a great difference here, but why would he skip the sign of the cross, Michael Haynes?
Well, as you say, this is one of the things that's really caused a lot of controversy. It's he's going as the Pope. He's going as the Vicar of Christ. He's very visibly there as Pope. It's not unexpected that if you go to an event led by a Pope, you're going to have something Catholic. You're going to have a Catholic prayer or a Catholic blessing. The sign of the cross invoking the Trinity is really how Catholics are known by. The cross particularly has been the symbol of Catholicism. And it's the symbol which is persecuted. Often you see now, particularly in the West, the cross is being banned from public settings. It's historically identified as the Catholic symbol. So for him to renege, to invoke the Trinity, to renege on making a sign of the cross, a visible sign of the cross, and giving his blessing is very, very bizarre. It was an interreligious gathering with a group of young people hosted by the Scotus Occidentes group. It's a non-Catholic collaborative which Pope Francis was actually involved in establishing back in Argentina before he was Pope. But even so, he is Pope. The people who have gone to attend this event are aware of that. And for him to essentially lay down the importance of the Catholic faith, of the Catholic Church, is really quite shocking, especially when you're dealing with young people, with souls who are at a very formative stage of their life. They need to receive teaching, and it appears that he has reneged on that duty.
It does feel so much that he gives up too much ground in an effort to reach out in an ecumenical way to other religions. I mean, there's the whole Grand Imam ecumenical effort towards climate change. I mean, where is the evangelization? Where is the conversion? Where is the make all nations disciples component to this trip? Is there anything in this trip that I might have missed, that I didn't pay attention to, that we should, give credit where credit is due, where Pope Francis did or said something to these non-religions that we'd be proud of? Is there anything like that?
I think there are some aspects which are very interesting. I mean, papal trips are always a mixed bag, especially nowadays. And one of the events on his schedule was a visit he paid to a home run by religious sisters caring for the children with physical or intellectual disabilities, many of whom have been just abandoned by the parents. And so he is shining a light there on the plight of those in society who would otherwise be forgotten. But I mean, to your direct point about is there something with regards to leaders of other creeds that we've missed? It does seem that on every one of these meetings, he's really prioritized harmony and unity, which can be done in a way that still promotes the Catholic faith, but he's not done it in a way that promotes the Catholic faith. There's just the veneer of unity,
which causes greater scandal and division, in my opinion, which brings us to the big one, right? Pope Francis, every religion is a way to arrive at God. To listen to him say these things right there, so many Catholics are asking whether or not Pope Francis has abandoned the faith. Now, in the past, I said this yesterday, he's made statements that say there is no salvation outside the church. You have to find God through the Catholic Church. He's made these statements in the past, which, in my opinion, makes this even more scandalous, because he said this and didn't clarify and left it out there. And as you report, the Vatican had to further clarify those statements, didn't they?
Absolutely. So this was another interreligious event, another event with young people. It was held in a Catholic junior school in Singapore, if I remember rightly. And he makes this bizarre comment. He abandons his official transcript, which he prepared. I think it went up on the screen briefly. He pointed to it, and then he answered his questions just off the cuff. And he fielded questions on bullying, on religious fraternity and dialogue, and the use of the internet. And he makes this striking claim: every religion is a way to arrive at God. He equates religions with languages, which appears, as so many commentators have noted now in the last few days, that it appears to just completely deny the truth.
I'm afraid we just lost Michael.
We are getting down to the wire at this point, but let me pull up this article. I got to tell you, it is frustrating. And again, tomorrow on the program, we're going to have Father Gerald Murray on the show to give us his take on every religion is a way to arrive at God. Michael Haynes, are you still there?
I am. Apologies for that.
We're down to probably just about a minute now, and I'm sorry with that we lost you the internet connection there. But maybe get your final thoughts on the "every religion is a way to arrive at God" statement from Pope Francis. Maybe the internet's just not going to cooperate. I got to be honest with you. I've been to Rome. The internet does lack a little bit of je ne sais quoi. I don't know what to say, but it is what it is. We'll be linking to Michael Haynes' articles over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT, livesitenews.com. He is the senior Vatican correspondent, and I couldn't recommend you checking out his articles enough. They're very, very good, and he is timely on this stuff. Not to mention, he's just reported that the season 2 of Synod on Synodality is about to release this October, and it's about to get very, very interesting. So we're going to link to that as well over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Michael Haynes, if you're still listening, hopefully you are. God bless you and God love you, my friend. Love having you on the team. If you want to come rejoin at the top of the hour, we'll bring you back on the after show. We can continue. But otherwise, so grateful to have Michael Haynes on the team today. Check him out, livesitenews.com. Coming up after the break, we're going to have a conversation about the pandemic and all of those who suffered a lot, more than just losing their job. That's coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
We hear all the time from listeners who discovered the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on promotional material under the About tab. There you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Request yours today.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. The Pillar reports Pope appoints exiled Nicaraguan bishop as synod delegate. Yesterday, the Vatican announced the list of delegates for the second season of the Synod on Synodality to be held October the 2nd through the 27th this year. The list of 368 members includes many of the same delegates from the first season. However, there are about 24 new participants, mostly substitutions. But one name stands out amongst the new papal appointees. It's a plot twist. Bishop Rolando Alvarez of Matagalpa, Nicaragua. Alvarez was exiled to Rome in January after being arrested by the Ortega regime and sentenced to 26 years in prison for conspiracy. Nicaraguan exiles believe that Ortega was trying to get a China deal kind of going for him. He wanted to be able to appoint bishops, or at least friendly bishops, to him and his regime. But Pope Francis, appointing Alvarez to the Synod on Synodality, seems to be sending a signal of clear support for the bishops. A Newsweek is reporting 2 ex-New York City fire chiefs arrested as corruption scandal expands. 2 former New York City Fire Department chiefs were arrested yesterday on charges of soliciting tens of thousands of dollars in bribes in exchange for offering preferential treatment in the department's Fire Prevention Bureau. Anthony Sacovino and Brian Cordasco were arrested on bribery, corruption, and false statement charges, alleging that they solicited and accepted bribes from 2021 to 2023. The arrests come amid a widening corruption investigation of New York City's government. On Saturday, Lisa Zornberg, Mayor Eric Adams' top legal advisor, abruptly resigned. The reason for her departure remains unclear. And Catholic Vote is reporting top Francis appointee accused of covering up abuse. Cardinal Robert Prevost failed to take appropriate canonical investigation steps when he was bishop of a Peruvian diocese after 3 women alleged that 2 priests abused them when they were between the ages of 10 and 14, a new editorial by the New Daily Compass reports. Pope Francis appointed Prevost to the post of prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops in 2023. We'll be linking to that and much more in the show notes today. thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Hey, can I just thank our sponsor, iCatholic Mobile? I just love iCatholic Mobile because they are the only phone company in the world from a Catholic perspective. Yeah, Charity Mobile, it's great. Patriot Mobile, I've heard of them. They're not bad. But none of them are Catholic like iCatholic Mobile. And if you got to have a phone bill, why not leverage that phone bill to support Catholic media apostolates just like ours? So, we get a cut of their profit because they are generous and want to support groups like us who are trying to share the good, the true, and the beautiful with a world that desperately needs to hear it, because there is no salvation outside the church. They believe that. They know you believe that, and they want to be on your team. Check them out, iCatholicMobile.com. Great sponsor of what we're doing here at the Station of the Cross, and we couldn't be more proud to partner up with them. Again, iCatholicMobile.com. Hey, can I just say there is an opportunity here because many have suffered back in the pandemic of 2022. 2020, how long did it last? When did it end? In 23, I think, if I'm not mistaken. In some places, it lasted that long. Parishes closed. Many lost their jobs because they stood up for what they believed and refused. They refused to cave in. And I've had many conversations like this, especially when it came to the military mandates. I would have an attorney on to share those stories of people fighting for their rights. By the way, Donald Trump said he would reinstate all of those that lost their jobs as a result of that. But many lost their jobs, and it got worse. It just got worse. They were isolated and marginalized. And we have such a guest on with us. He's one of our insiders, as a matter of fact. Mark Ingoglio joins us by phone. Mark, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for this opportunity.
Well, let's jump straight into it, Mark, because we're going to run out of time faster than you think. So take us back, 2020, the pandemic. Where were you? What were you doing? And what happened to you?
So I served in a I'm fire and EMS traditionally, and then prior to that, I taught school, which we get to later. But in 2020, I had been working throughout the teens at a subacute brain injury rehab. And that is, I mean, if you kind of think about it, you sustain a brain injury, a TBI, a CVA, a stroke, etc. You might go to the ER, you might go to therapy after that. But then for those who need it, this is subacute therapy, and so it's usually in-house, 6 months to a year plus. And this fell under the healthcare worker mandate when COVID was in full effect.
Mm. And you were in New York?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, in Ulster County, New York, at a subacute.
And if I remember correctly, because I'm sitting in the People's Republic of Texas, so life was just different for me. But if I remember correctly, in New York, it was particularly bad. I mean, the mandates, the sort of the lockdowns, the masking, and all of that. It was pretty severe, wasn't it?
It was. At the end, some of these people at your healthcare facility, whether it's a hospital, whether it's your grandma's nursing home, whether it's in a facility like mine, these patients were in their rooms. They couldn't leave for the better part of a year and sometimes 2 years. And from time to time, they'd be let out. There would be a determination that there would be a drop in cases and so on, and so they'd let you out and they'd test you, and then all of a sudden somebody would test positive. And by the way, a positive test just means a positive test. It doesn't mean you're symptomatic. It doesn't mean you're at death's door. It doesn't mean you're exhibiting symptoms, the type of symptoms that we associate. So the moment that happens, everybody back in the room, this kind of thing. And when you think about the long-term effects of some of these injuries and the dementia that sets in over time and so on, some of these folks, if you have these people in your family, this, the memory goes and the perception of reality is altered, and your ability to interact with them is altered. And then put on that the fact that the only contact these people have is the man from space. You have all this PPE on.
Yeah, like E.T., like from the movie E.T. It just is bizarre. And I also kind of remember, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I've covered any of these stories, the virus wiped out a lot of the nursing home communities as well.
It did. The son of Mario Cuomo, the governor of New York at that time, he sent COVID patients to the nursing home. So that was his specific order. And so that's the way that
crazy
COVID went through the nursing homes.
But you decided, because we got an article here at 1peter5.com, we're going to link to it. The saga of the Catholic fighting man continues. But you decided you were not going to get that shot, did you?
Absolutely not. It's a life issue. If we were talking about a vaccine that was derived from or the testing was associated with stem cell lines from a baby seal, do you think that would fly? Of course not. From a death row inmate? No, it wouldn't fly. But from an unborn child, sure, why not? Oh, by the way, it's those babies were killed 60, 70 years ago, or I think it was 50 or 60 years ago. Why should that matter?
Right. It matters. It matters. And we're living in a world. And one of the things that I talked about during that time, and I kept getting in trouble every time I talked about it because the censors didn't like it, but it was like a diabolical confusion that just made everyone crazy. It seemed like people, the major parts of the world bought into this crazy, and it felt like Twilight Zone. It felt otherworldly, very surreal, would you say?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you make a good faith attempt to get some good information from people who should know. And every one of those people that you think you should know, that you think would know that, you get a different answer from each one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What happened to you because you didn't get the shot?
So in late 2020, the push came for us to get a shot. We had these clinics in-house on Christmas Eve of 2020, and we were all expected to show up whether we were going to get the shot or not. It was obvious, pressure being brought to bear. In the summer of 2021, the healthcare worker mandate took effect in New York. I refused. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, so I had plenty of vacation time. We were all working around the clock during COVID, so none of us took any vacation. And so I had a lot of vacation banked. I was going to take some vacation time and think it over because it took effect in September. The mandate took effect in September. I was denied the right to take any vacation until I would tell, what I intended to do about the shot.
Wow.
God bless the Thomas More Society and Chris Ferrara. I think there were 26 or 27 healthcare workers throughout the state of New York that they took us on as clients, and we sued in federal court. And Judge Hurd, the federal judge who was appointed by Bill Clinton, no less, he heard our case and he issued a temporary restraining order. And so I was permitted to work under that temporary restraining order. I was actually granted a religious exemption. In New York, the religious exemption was excised from the mandate. Your First Amendment rights to freedom of religion, it was excised. I don't understand how that could be done. And it's so Judge Hurd put a temporary restraining order. I worked for an extra month with added restrictions. So I was walking around in the spacesuit while everybody else got to wear the blue surgical masks.
Of course.
The Governor Hochul successfully went to court and had the TRO thrown out. And at that point, I was placed on leave, on unpaid leave. And I was told at some point in the future I would be terminated if the mandate continued. So, so this court case, by the way, if you want to reference it, is Dr. A et al. Versus Hochul. It's a federal court. It's a federal court case. Eventually, So I was let go, and by the time 60 or 90 days that they had given me ran out, the mandate was still in effect. I was told that if the legal situation changed, I was willing to come back if it was within just the suspension period. To full duty, and if I had been terminated, I was willing to. I was able to reapply, and if the job was still open, I could come back, which I subsequently did about 3 months ago.
Oh wow, it took that long.
Yeah, well, I applied, but I was told by the employer that the mandate is still in effect. Now, actually, the mandate has expired, and we have evidence demonstrating that clearly. The mandate expired last August. Last May, a year ago this past May. And so the mandate has been not in effect in New York for approximately a year, a little more. And but we're told, some of us have been told, myself included, that the mandate is still in effect and therefore we can't be rehired. So you want to
Isn't
talk
that
about
something?
Yeah. So
That's
it's
crazy.
still alive and well, these mandates.
Well,
Officially,
we're coming right up against a break here. We're having a conversation with Mark Ingoglio, and his article over at 1 Peter 5, by the way, goes back to 2022, the saga of the Catholic fighting man, which I found very interesting because it was like reading it was like a time capsule of sorts of what was going on at the time, overturning, the Dobbs case, all of this, very, very fascinating to kind of step back to that moment because I got to be honest, it feels like forever ago now to me. It was so emotionally, psychologically overwhelming of a period of time in history that a lot of people are like, we got to move on. And we kind of have. We've forgotten what took place. We've forgotten the impact that it had. And I think, I'm speaking for myself anyway, I think I've forgotten what's happened to so many thousands of people, not just in this country, but around the world, who are marginalized, isolated, and rejected, losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their communities, their friends, their family, and more because they refused, because they stood up for what they believed in, especially as Catholics. And that's the conversation we're having. We're going to get back to that with Mark here in just a moment, coming up after this 2-minute break. Don't forget, if you know any Catholic young adults who are into writing, my daughter's launched a special group. Link in the show notes today at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We'll be right back. More of a Catholic Take is coming up next. Don't go anywhere. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, guess what? I'm going on a pilgrimage with Bishop Strickland to Greece and to Turkey in May. It's going to be a great trip. Plus, we're going to go to Rome. You're not going to want to miss this. If you've never been on a pilgrimage, why not go with Bishop Strickland? I'm going. I'd love for you to go too. I'm going to put a link in the description for you or in the show notes for you so that you can find more information. We're going to go to Ephesus, Patmos, more. It's going to be really, really incredible. Again, the link will be at the stationofthecross.com/ACT in the show notes that producer Jake will post at the top of the hour. We're having a conversation with one of our ACT insiders today. Mark Ingoglio joins us. He was a healthcare worker from New York during the pandemic era. Do you remember, have you forgotten? Have you, tried to move on mentally as I have? I think he's reminded me of just, how crazy those times really were. And it really wasn't that long ago, although it feels like it. Mark, welcome back to the show. Right before the break, we were talking about how you stood up for your faith, refused to get that shot, and they forced you out. What was that like as far as, the financial hardship or emotional, psychological? What role did your faith play in that part of your life?
So, I grew up during a 26-year-long pontificate where we all talked about the dignity of the human person.
Right.
Right? So the dignity of the human person, the dignity of your loved ones in those facilities was not maintained. Not in a Catholic facility,
Amen.
Not in a public facility, not in some other private facility. It just wasn't. The dignity of the human people, of the human persons working at those facilities was not maintained. They were not allowed to maintain it themselves. So let's forget that. But in fact, if we're going to talk about the dignity of the human person, the dignity of the unborn person who was objectified in the creation of these vaccines, and you can say that there was, a cell line derived from a cell line derived from a cell line going back. But somebody died to obtain those cell lines.
Right. Yeah.
And
we all know from Kamala Harris being an attorney out in California, how she went after Sandra Merritt and what's his name for those undercover videos of baby body parts being sold for pharmaceutical therapies. Let that sink in for a moment. We know that the industry just loves to use baby body parts and cell lines to give you your modern medicine today.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Now you're on the hook. If you took that medication, now you're on the hook. They've got you. We had you do it once. You said yes once. And when we ask you to say yes again, you can't say no. Or if you do, you pay the consequences. right? That's another big issue. I mean, I just don't. Do you believe in the dignity of the human person or not? Do you know that the church founded by Jesus Christ preaches the dignity of the human person such that he took on human nature and lived as man and suffered and died? Do you believe that? If you believe that, I don't know. The words fail me. I'm sorry.
So how did your faith, I mean, you stood up for what you believed, you lose your job. Where are you at emotionally when that moment happens?
It's, like throughout the 2000 teens, I had been working with another group of persons that are in the news now, right? PVS, persistent vegetative state patients that we say have disorders of consciousness.
Sure.
So the PVS patients, the emerging patients, the severely brain injured patients, the intermediately brain injured patients, those were my patients.
Wow, the ones that they want to harvest the organs from as fast as possible.
Yeah. The patients that people say, gee, it's a shame they survived.
Wow.
Because of what kind of a life is this person living, et cetera, et cetera. These are my people. These are my patients.
Mm.
So I mean, their dignity hung by a thread in the first place. But then you lock them in their rooms for a year, as I say, 2 years perhaps. Even today, I mean, I still have friends and colleagues and so on that are still at the facility, and it still goes on. They still have, somebody test positive for something, and then the whole place gets locked down, and you wear your blue masks, and some people have to wear the N95s, not the KN95, not the duckbill ones, but the ones that suck to your face.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
And I mean, for goodness sake,
it was bizarre times. We're going to run out of time pretty quick here, Mark. It was bizarre. Where are we at now? Where are you at now? Now that you're back to work, how are you doing?
I am. I have not gotten back to work in my field. I'm actually teaching literature and Latin at a private Catholic school, and doing a variety of odd jobs. I don't have my income level back. I'm doing a variety of odd jobs, ride sharing and all kinds of things.
Wow.
I'm an event medic at different. I wander around and do private medical work at various events and all of this. But I am blessed to be able to teach where I'm at.
Amen.
Nobody has, there are no enemies of the faith there. So God has been very good to me when I consider how things could have run for me. Emotional falling apart, psychological falling apart, and all the rest of that. God has taken great care of me, and especially through the weapon of the rosary.
I think many Catholics were surprised to what level, to what extent they were, their employers, the society was willing to go to kind of, toe the party line here, to keep the speaking points going and to punish those that wouldn't go along. You agree?
And there's a financial incentive. You get state money, you get federal money if you can, meet these benchmarks. That is to say, if you can have this number of people vaccinated, if you can have this number of people doing this or that. That's a big part of it. And some of the psychological suffering that I endured, and I'm sure many others, was the fact that you have these people who are friends of yours and colleagues long term. And I mean colleagues like, not I worked in the cubicle next to yours and we get along pretty good, but we've been in the trenches. I mean, taking care of these people who need so much. And these are these are your battle buddies. And, now, are they on your side or not? They smile and they sort of extend their well wishes and they,
sure,
extend sympathies and whatever. Is that the case or not? And you kind of wonder sometimes.
Now, do you think we did this once? I'm wondering whether or not the world can tolerate another one. It seemed to me that by the end of that, years-long process, many on the left and the right were pretty sick of it. Do you think that they would tolerate another one? There's been pushes already in parts of the world. They're trying to lock things down, mandate shots for the monkeypox thing. Do you think they would tolerate a second round?
It depends what people are willing to give up. What are you willing to get? Listen,
Mark, we were willing to give up Easter liturgy.
Exactly.
We were willing to give up. I would say we were willing to give up everything.
Yes,
literally everything.
So the opponent knows that you're willing to give up everything. If it connects it to things that you really enjoy or like, and we'll close it down if you don't do what we tell you. Right?
Yeah. Mark Ingoglio, we're out of time on the radio side here. The saga of the Catholic fighting man continues is his article from 2022. We're going to link to it. I think you should read it. It's very interesting. It's like a time capsule, going back in time to a time that was just so bizarre, so surreal. And, I guess it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since I've remembered to pray for all of those that were affected, not just those that got sick and lost their lives. Pray for their repose, but also for those that lost their jobs, their economies, their livelihoods, their families crushed under the weight of tyranny. Let's pray for them too. We'll see you in the after show and right back here tomorrow.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
And we're back. Welcome to the Aftershow, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Praise be to God. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Oh, man, did I bring back some bad memories for some folks? I'm wondering. Just let me know in the comments if you're like, I wanted to forget all of this, not remember. Like, I had forgotten. Like, really, I think I just moved on. I moved on emotionally. So it was, I think, a good opportunity to remind ourselves just how bad things really, really were. Just what level that they were willing to sacrifice everything for the cause. It just seems really, really crazy. I used to have, I would have these conversations on the show, and just I'd get pummeled by the powers that be over it. It was rough.
I'm wondering if this is one of our live streams that's going to get taken down. By the way, we do have Michael Haynes back with us.
Hey, Michael, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us again. Appreciate you being on. Let me jump back in with you in just 1 second. T-Storm is here. Damon is here. Eileen is here. Troy Lockett, good morning to you. James 16897, good morning to you. Mike K, our friend from Virginia. Sharon Felton, good morning to you. Paul, our friend from Buffalo. Praise be to God. Yvonne, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Kevin, good morning to you, Kevin, on the Telegram group. Karen Collins is here. Good morning to you, Karen. Praise be to God. Thanks for being on the team today. Really, really appreciate it. Deo gratias. Yvonne, good morning to you. Everybody hanging on. Should I move the Telegram, the ACT Insider Group, away from Telegram to another app? Let me know if you think so, because there's been issues lately with compatibility with older phones. Now it's not compatible, so some people have been cut off and not been able to be a part of it. Let me know what you're thinking. If you have a preferred other app, let me know that too.
Maybe Damon can put up a poll for us.
Yeah, there you go. He's going to have a list of all the other apps. Yeah. Hey, Elizabeth Ramirez, good morning to you. Don Paddock Jr. Barra, good morning to you. Praise be to Jesus. Patty, Rachel Jordan, Mimi, Jane, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Appreciate you being here. Lynn Pine, Honey West, Gus DMH, Penelope, good morning to you. Sci-Fi Mike, Gus DMH. Gus says, in Massachusetts, there were vax mandates. I refused to get the jab. Lord Jesus saved me from losing my job. Praise be to God. Glad to hear that. James 16897, Cherokee Woman 20, good morning to you. Janice, Helen Grace, good morning to you. Miriam is here. Robert Stevenson is here. Debbie, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Along the narrow way, good morning to you. Alaric, good morning to you. I see Mark has also joined us in Proximus' his online handle, so he's been a part of our show for a long time now. It's good to have you back on. William Jones, Frank Rangel, Good morning to you. Harmony, good morning to you. KSW Benedictine Oblate, good morning to you. And everybody else, thanks for hanging out. Flying Tigers, I see you here. Good morning. Thanks for hanging out. Let's go back to Michael Haynes for a second. Let's go back to Pope Francis. Can you, Michael, good morning. Thank you again for your time. Can you give us a comparative difference? Like, can you summarize what was the difference between what the Pope said and the translator on stage was translating in real time versus what the Vatican later tried to clarify?
Absolutely. I'll need to get the archived version up on the screen here. But so the Pope was speaking in Italian, and he was having this live translation, Italian to English, for the Singaporean audience. And the translator was translating his words sort of line by line, passage by passage. He was translating it accurately. And then you had this strange, bizarre scenario where the Vatican, I forget the exact words, I'll try and bring them up, but they put out this English translation, which was different to what the Pope said, different to all the other translations. But it was much less controversial. You know, a classic style of trying to rewrite history, rewrite reality, in a sense. And this sparked a debate online, people saying, well, the English translation is the correct thing, and somehow not really noticing or choosing to notice the fact that what the Pope said is actually the correct thing rather than what the Vatican's saying he said. It was incredibly bizarre. They did then have to correct it. There was an outburst of controversy about that as well, in addition to the whole statement. And they've now corrected the English version, so it does read in accordance with what he said.
Interesting. So, can I ask? I just want to. Okay, my brain is going in 1,000 directions here, and what I really want to know is, from your perspective, you've been watching, you've been close. You're a Vatican senior correspondent, LifeSiteNews. You've been in these press briefings many times. You've talked to some of these people many times. Is this a case of, like, okay, so the Pope does whatever the Pope's going to do, and the staff are like, oh, here we go again. Do they consult? Like, who do they consult with before they issue these clarification statements? Are they doing this all on their own? Like, do they just try to, on their own, spin this thing as positive as possible, or do they actually have to consult with senior leadership? And if so, who would that be?
Well, so with the with all his statements, his messages, and so on, it's a collaborative effort, I think, between the officials in the Secretariat of State and then the press office. So the officials close to the Pope will work on getting the translation ready. They'll then send that over to the press office, and then the press office will publish this. I don't actually know the precise ins and outs of who's making the decision to change the wording on one specific translation. That it's something we have seen happen in the past. So it could be that there is an attempt, maybe it's an unofficial editorial policy to try and just downplay things for the English-speaking audience, because the English-speaking audience is probably one of the largest audiences that the Vatican's going to have. And then you add in all the Catholic media outlets, which there are many more of in America than there are in the UK, but the English audience is going to be huge. So if they can kind of quash the uprising which is brewing, then that would definitely be in their interest.
The other issue, one of the other things we didn't talk about, I talked about it yesterday actually on the show, and that was the Pope's statements on American politics while he's on the plane ride home, and which was, I thought, incredible and really, really fascinating. Maybe I'm wrong. I asked my audience, in fact, let me see if I can't get to the poll results. I asked my audience yesterday if they thought, at least I asked them on YouTube anyway, if they thought that the Pope was low-key trying to tell us who to vote for. And I'll tell you the results of that poll. Hold on, give me a second. I'll get there. Posts. Let me go to posts. Let me go to this. Here we go. Can I put this on screen? So as of right now, do you think Pope Francis was asking American Catholics to vote for Kamala Harris? This is how I reported that. 52% said yes, 14% said no, 6% said I'd rather not say, and 27% said I don't know. Now, the way I took it, and this is where I want to get your comment, Michael, on this, because the way I took it was he was trying to say Donald Trump and Kamala are exactly the same on the abortion issue. Therefore, that nullifies. They're both against babies. It's kind of how paraphrasing here. But Donald Trump's really against the immigrants, making him worse. So the lesser of two evils. Everybody's got to vote, so you got to go vote your conscience. I thought it was a low-key way to say you have to vote for Kamala Harris. How did you take it?
I understood it in a similar way. I understood that the greater criticism was being levied at Trump because Francis has always had, since the beginning of his pontificate, he's had this attention to migration, to migrants coming in. He's never really distinguished between legal, good migration, proper migration through the proper channels, and illegal migration. And so this issue has been foremost. We've seen him criticize Trump before for in veiled ways for building of walls, for isolating oneself from migrants. And so I think I would side with your understanding. It's very clear that there's more of an attack being made against Trump. Because if anything, the issue of migration is arguably one that we've heard more of from Francis than the issue of abortion. He's mentioned abortion, and he has made these comments that abortion is murder on occasion, but a much more consistent theme in his pontificate has been this acceptance of migration. He's been, time after time. I think it was his first visit actually outside of Rome was to Lampedusa, bringing the spotlight onto migration, where Lampedusa being the port where migrants are coming in off the sea into Italy. This has really been kind of one of his central passion projects, if you like. And Kamala Harris is going to have much more of an alignment with him than Trump is on that issue.
I want to be as fair as I can here. I think everybody knows my opinion on everything already. But just for the sake of being fair, is this a case of just tone deafness? Is he just tone deaf? How can you say, how can you be so tone deaf to the incredible, crazy societal disruption that mass immigration, illegal immigration, unchecked immigration is causing across Europe, America, and beyond? How can you be so tone deaf to that? How can you act as though that's not really happening, that everything is just fine? It's not fine under any circumstances. It's not okay. But is he just being if I'm trying to be fair, is he being tone deaf? What say you, Michael Haynes?
It's really tricky. I mean, even people and friends I know who previously been based in Rome and have left in recent years have highlighted how the city itself has been drastically changed by this rise in illegal immigration. So it's not like he is unaware of things. It's not like he's sort of able to have multiple examples of how this illegal immigration is just destroying society. Particularly, it's destroying the Christian foundations of society. And he's very much echoing the globalist style talking points, sort of the UN talking points, the main talking points from the international community. In my home country of England, in the US also, we've got similar things. It's hard to say exactly what his motive is, but I think there's not much excuse for not seeing the reality here. And if he's choosing to ignore it, if he's being carefully guided to ignore it, perhaps by his advisors, maybe that's happening. But there would be numerous people who would be happy to present him with evidence and show him exactly how destructive this is, whether or not that is making it through to him or being prevented by his aides or by himself. I don't know. Well,
I think that's a great point. I think it's a valid point. The popes can be victims of the bureaucracy that they rule, right? Like the information that gets to them is funneled and channeled through them. I mean, does Pope Francis have a smartphone? I mean, we've seen him in the past, in the midst of events, just like, oh, taking a call here. Hold on one second. I know, I'm coming right back. Hold on, and take these calls. So he's got a phone. Does he stay on his phone? Is he doom scrolling Twitter? During the day, like how much information is he personally acquiring versus getting his information through aides? We've seen in the past how, for instance, JP2, especially in his latter years, as his health declined, he was a complete victim of whatever Jewish wanted to tell him or not tell him. We saw the same thing under Benedict XVI, and I'm sure that's true for a lot of popes in history. So is it a case where he's just getting partial information from the staff and they're funneling and filtering as they see fit? Or is it, I have to believe he's not a dumb man. I don't think you get to be Pope, get through a conclave and all the rest without being wise, and know how to play the game. You're a politician essentially at this point. So I don't think he's dumb. Mm-hmm. I think he's calculated. That's my interpretation. But how much of it is just information gatekeepers preventing him from seeing the big picture?
I think you're right. We've seen that with previous pontificates where you have this almost a bit like a wall. You have the network of aides around the Pope essentially filtering what will get in and what will get out. I think it's quite different under Francis. I think if all the reports and all the analysts are true, it seems like, if anything, it's completely the opposite. He's able to access information about different people. He's able to sort of run the Vatican in the way where he has knowledge of all the strings where they're leading, and which is very much different kettle of fish to how it was under previous popes. So I don't believe he's going to be he's not going to be poorly informed. I think, as you say, he's a very astute man. You can see that just in the manner in which he handles himself on these visits. The very carefully worded statements he's going to say to different groups. He really knows exactly what game to play, if you like, with the different players. So I think it really doesn't leave much room for him being poorly informed. I think if there's evidence for him to see, he'll be able to find it.
So he's choosing then. He is choosing to interpret the immigration situation in the way that he wants to, even though it's demonstrable the damaging and destructive effects mass, unchecked illegal immigration is having on communities, lives, economies, and more. It's not charitable to the people who want to immigrate, and it ain't charitable to the people they're immigrating towards. And he must be choosing to ignore all of that for expediency in politics, it would seem. You also reported, let me just ask you about this, because you reported also about Pope Francis saying Catholics will suffer under his deal, because that deal is about to be renewed with China. So, again, is he tone deaf here? I mean, the Chinese Cardinal Zen has been trying to beg Francis to hear it and listen. And he wouldn't even give him a meeting, like, for crying out loud. The guy sat in St. Peter's Square waiting for an opportunity. Hello, Cardinal here. Anyone? Nope. Tone deafness. And but boy, you name the pro-abort Democrat warlord, and they'll get an appointment, but not Cardinal Zen. So we're left, because it's secret, we're left to just spitball this backseat quarterback. Is it a money deal that's motivating them here? Is if he knows that the Chinese Catholics are going to suffer, but he does the deal anyway, is it because he thinks this is the best way to create more friendly relations with the Chinese Communist government in China? What would be behind the scenes there?
This was a fascinating comment. 2018, he makes this comment. It's around, so obviously the deal has just been signed in 2018. He sent this letter to the Chinese Catholics extolling the virtues of his New Deal, and saying how it's going to create a new chapter for the church in China. And then also on the plane, he says, well, underground Catholics will suffer. There's always suffering in an agreement. But it does seem like he goes on to almost accept that they're going to suffer if they stay in the underground church. And he makes reference of the martyr-like faith he points to and how that's inspiring. But it seems as though he's saying, you can do that, and you can practice your martyr-like faith if you want to stay in the underground church, and that's fine. That's interesting. But I've got this deal now, which has made everything fine and above board with the official church. So, whilst it might be impressive for you to stay and suffer, almost why would you? That's the sense that's coming from these comments. It's very tone deaf. I mean, as you brought up Cardinal Zen has highlighted this time and time again. He's called it a betrayal. He's made calls for Cardinal Parolin to resign based on statements that he's made about the deal. Yeah. He's been very, very vocal on this. I mean, Asian News and numerous other sites documenting this persecution have said, look, the underground Catholics feel like they've been abandoned and they are now just suffering and waiting. It's bizarre to see what did the Pope expect from this. China experts have also pointed to the fact that you don't make a deal with Beijing and expect to come out on top of it, which we've seen particularly in the recent months, because Beijing has just violated the deal time and time again by installing their own bishop choices and then informing the Vatican after the fact.
Right.
So they're pulling the strings,
Yeah. So what motivates them to keep a deal? What motivates them to renew a deal? We're all saying it's money. How true is that?
I don't actually know. I've read through the arguments that it's money. It's also, and one of the aspects of Francis's pontificate, I think, is this push for fraternity, this kind of veneer of smiling faces, of harmony. And if he can leave the legacy of having created, at least on paper, a union with China, then that's something which I think his supporters would be very interested in doing. There's also a push to have a similar style relationship or deal, possibly with Vietnam. So it could be that he's just trying to have this almost like the most superficial of friendships, and then he can create this linking of hands around the world, this sort of fraternity that he keeps pushing. It could be that. It could be the money aspect also. It's something I wouldn't be able to speak to more, really.
Nicaragua now wants a deal. They're wanting the China deal in Nicaragua. Do you think he'll go for that?
It would be more surprising, I think, at least at the moment, because you've got the regime over there criticizing the church, and also you have bishops, particularly Bishop Alvarez, given sanctuary in the Vatican. I think the climate would be slightly too hostile, at least at the moment, in my own poor assessment. Maybe 5 years down the line, it could have changed, but I'd be quite surprised if they made any sort of formal arrangement at the moment.
The last segment of the radio program, we were talking to somebody who lost their job during the pandemic because they didn't get the medicine that was mandated. And we were talking about the ramifications of all of that in their lives. And I sort of had forgotten how many people were affected by all of that. Similarly, I had sort of forgotten about how bad it was at the Vatican in particular, how much they embraced all of that. Wow, that was surprising, just how they went hook, line, and sinker into those mandates. Do you think they would do that again? Would they be prepared to go round two if the monkeypox thing got worse, for instance?
I think so. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, it was such a huge issue at the time, and it almost every public statement Francis was making at the time was extolling, criticizing countries for not allowing poorer countries access to the vaccine, or praising the fact that we have this vaccine, saying there's a duty to take it. So I think the fact that they've done this once means that they would be very, very swift to go down that line again. I mean, once he's equated taking such a thing with being a moral duty, then you're essentially making your new morality there, and I don't think that would be any different in the future.
Yeah, I have to pull some parallels together here, because in this conversation with you, I'm thinking about the conversation I had yesterday, in fact, with right here, hold on, with Father about Fulton Sheen. and Fulton Sheen's last word and testament on the demoniac, on the demonic in society. But there's a section on the Antichrist, the end times, and I quoted it yesterday during the show about how do you get how does the stage need to be set in order for the Antichrist to be revealed? You got to have the ability to have world domination. World domination happens when the technology is finally available to create that scenario. And I'm thinking, well, one, there's a fraternity with the whole world linking hands. You were talking about that a minute ago, and then there's the technology that was already demonstrated during the pandemic of leveraging smartphone technology and tracking. It started in China, but it was spread to places like the Vatican, for instance, where you could track people and their social status and give them access or deny them access to things based on that. It would feel like these actions that are happening under this pontificate, I'm going to assume the best here, aren't intended for that purpose to bring about world domination, but boy, could they be used for that purpose. Would you agree?
Very much so. And I think they are aided hugely by the denial or the abdication of duty of the Pope, but also of numerous cardinals, bishops, and priests. In the last couple of days, I think it was Bishop Strickland who issued his apology for the actions of prelates during COVID. But the fact that we saw bishops of the Catholic Church not stand up to regimes which were closing down churches, preventing people access to worship God, to go to Mass, to access the sacraments. But the bishops were actually, encouraging that. They were often leading the charge on that. That's a complete and utter application of their religious duty, their moral duty, even just their civic duty. There were numerous people who were voices against all the disastrous laws and which came through during those years, who were not religious and just fighting back from a not natural point of view, saying that this is unjust.
Yeah.
So the Catholic leaders have a huge amount of blame in this.
I was having a text message exchange when the news broke, when your story broke about Pope Francis's comments on in Singapore about all religions are a way to arrive at God phrase, and many Catholics think that Pope Francis is a heretic. They think that this is material. Anyway, I'm going to have that conversation tomorrow with Father Gerald Murray, but my point being that it's causing great scandal and great turmoil and great confusion. Catholics are scratching their head going, what the heck does he mean? What is all this? And it's just one after another now for 12 years. And I said to my friend, I said, listen, what needs to happen is every bishop needs to speak out. They kind of like fiducia supplicans. I think they kind of have to make their voice heard on these issues. I don't think you can air your dirty laundry in the public, in the shadows, in the darkness, behind closed doors anymore. I feel like it's important that you make yourself known what side of the team you're on. I'm thinking about Jesus in the book of the Apocalypse. I will spew you out of my mouth phrase. I'm thinking of that right now. And as of right now, do you have any idea how many bishops might have already voiced their opinion on Pope Francis's statement in Singapore? I'm thinking of Charles Chaput, Bishop Strickland, of course, but not many others. Are you aware of others?
I'm not aware of others publicly. There may be some perhaps who have issued veiled references, perhaps a short statement on X, Twitter, which I've not come across. But I believe those are just the only two.
That's crazy.
Numerous lay people and a number of very concerned priests, actually, but the bishops are notable in their absence.
It seems to lack charity towards Pope Francis to not say something, to not provide clarity in this age of confusion. When he's caused great confusion, it seems to lack charity towards him particularly. But we live in such it's not dystopian, but surreal times. It seems that I get the impression that they're just kind of biding their time, waiting for him to die in hopes that the next conclave will solve all these problems. Do you think it will?
I don't think it will, very sadly. I think you're definitely right in the fact that there's the sense that people are just waiting for Pope Francis to die, and maybe the next pope will be slightly more moderate. But if you're walking off the plank and you're at the edge, if you take a few steps back, you're still on the plank.
Right.
And in the meantime, the terrible effect of what harm it's doing to souls. Firstly, the harm it's doing to souls in the Catholic Church, but also to souls outside the Catholic Church. Maybe those who aren't even actively looking to join, but they're observing the Catholic Church. They're thinking people. I remember a conversation I had with a friend at the very sort of early days of Pope Francis' pontificate, and he was confused about what he saw as a sudden about change in the Catholic stance on same-sex relations, and he couldn't see the difference anymore between Catholic Church's position and the secular position. And it was fascinating to see this real-world implication of how confusion is damaging souls who might be coming to the traditional understanding, the traditional teaching, the true teaching of morality. And then if they hear Pope Francis say something which contradicts that, then they'll just turn away from it. They think, okay, well, clearly that what the church teaches is out of date. He's bringing the church in line with society. I don't have to worry about rejecting such and such a thing because it's not an issue anymore. It's not a sin. It's not a problem. Society is right, and the church just has to align itself with society, and then we'll all get on okay. And that is the huge danger that's happening in the meantime. These countless souls are being lost, are being confused, led astray. So the bishops to remain silent in the hope that another conclave, a new cardinal is going to become pope and not be as bad, is not really good enough for the Catholic faithful in the meantime.
Isn't he supposed to bring society in line with the church instead of the church in line with society? It's like, this is Captain Obvious, and I don't even have advanced degrees in anything. So why can't they get this? Why is this such a mystery?
Exactly. And this is, I think, all the more tragic when you look back, many decades ago, and you see the contrasting positions taken by previous popes in relation to society, to secular society, and how firm they were with teaching the Catholic faith, in outlining that Catholics had to be deliberately Catholic, that we didn't compromise on moral issues or on doctrinal issues in the public sphere, that the Church maintained her stance, that she was unashamed in proclaiming the truth. If you fast forward to now, it seems like all the things condemned by previous popes are the things that we're now practicing as current policy. We are, in a sense, ashamed as a church. It's almost like we have leaders who are doing their best to distance themselves from Catholic teaching in order to cozy up to current societal talking points as much as possible. There is really an abandonment of the church's identity by the part of by lay people, sure, by I suppose by all of us when we sin in a minor way, but in a very public way. There's this abandonment by leaders, by priests, bishops, cardinals, and very sadly the Pope on an international stage. And when you can, as a father of souls, renege on telling young children that they should be pointing themselves towards Christ, that's seismic.
We live in not boring times. And just like Fulton Sheen said in his words on the diabolical in society, the attacks, the corruption comes from within, and you've got to make your choice what team you're on, and you need to make it loud and proud because, yikes, we don't want to be hiding in the shadows, especially during these days. Michael Haynes, I'm out of time. Thank you for being on. Thanks for coming back on and extending our conversation. I really appreciated that. Got a lot out of it. Love to have you back soon, and always praying for you and your apostolate at LifeSiteNews.com. God bless you, Michael.
God bless you. Thank you very much indeed.
We're going to have Father Gerald Murray on the team tomorrow to give us his take on that, too. We'll see you there. God love you.